Sunlight glints off the sterile blue water. A polished sign reads, "Private property, no minors permitted." The backyard is pristine, silent, save for one sound, a tiny, gurgling splash. A child's shadow cuts across the manicured lawn. The perfect, empty surface of the pool breaks. A small, blue baby float tips, overturns, and bobs, sickeningly empty. The new house was an insult. Clara Redding stood at her second-story bedroom window, a cup of herbal tea steaming in her hand, and watched them. Watched the rusted U-Haul groan to a stop. Watched the woman, too young, hair in a messy blonde bun tank top, hop out. Watched the boy. He was perhaps 10, wiry and dark-haired, wearing a t-shirt with a faded superhero logo. He immediately grabbed a scuffed soccer ball from the truck's cab and kicked it against the duplex's peeling garage door. Thwack, thwack, thwack. The sound was a violation. Clara lived in the estates, a curated community of 7-figure homes where the lawns were manicured to golf green perfection and the HOA rules were thicker than a phone book. She and her husband, Mark, had the best lot, bordering the new, affordable duplexes that the city had forced the developer to build. And now the buffer was gone. They were here. "Mark," she called, her voice tight, "they're moving in." Mark appeared, knotting his tie. He glanced out the window. "So, they're renters, Clara. They'll be gone in a year." "A year is a long time," she murmured. She turned from the window and looked at the bassinet in the corner. Her son, Oliver, 6 months old, was a perfect porcelain doll. He was quiet. He was clean. He was hers. Everything in Clara's life was meticulously controlled, from the precise shade of greige on her walls to the organic, glass-jarred purees in her pantry. The centerpiece of her control was the pool. It was an architectural marvel, a zero-edge infinity pool that seemed to spill directly into the sky. It was her sanctuary. Mark had wanted to build a splash pad for Oliver. Clara had refused. "It's a liability, Mark, and it's ugly." "He's a baby, Clara. He's going to, play." "He can play inside. The pool is for us. It's an adult space." That afternoon, the thwack, thwack, thwack was replaced by shouting. Clara, trying to read a design magazine on her travertine patio, felt her jaw clench. The boy and 2 others were playing some manic, screaming game. Then silence, followed by, "Oh man, you did it." Clara looked up. The scuffed soccer ball was sitting on her pristine artificial turf, 5 feet from the pool's edge. She stood, grabbing the ball just as the boy's head appeared over the top of the 6-foot cedar fence. He was standing on a stack of moving boxes. "Excuse me, lady," he said. "Can I have my ball back?" Clara looked at the boy. She looked at the ball smudged with dirt. She looked at her perfect crystalline pool. "No," she said, her voice cool and clear. The boy's eyes widened. "What, but it's mine. This is private property. You and your friends are being disruptive. And this," she held up the ball, "is a hazard. It could have knocked over a lantern. It could have fallen into the pool and clogged the filter. It's just a ball. It's a nuisance." She turned and dropped the ball into her outdoor trash receptacle. "I would appreciate it if you kept your activities on your own property." The boy's face flushed red. You're mean." "I'm protecting my investment, and I'm warning you, I have a zero-tolerance policy for trespassing. Do not come near this fence again." She went inside, but the interaction left a bitter taste. She was right, of course, but the boy's look of sheer, unfiltered outrage stung. The next day, she had the sign installed. A custom-made brushed aluminum plaque mounted on the fence facing the duplex. "Private property, no trespassing, no minors permitted, violators will be prosecuted." "Isn't that a little much, Clara?" Mark asked, watching the installer drill it in. "It's a legal necessity," she replied, adjusting Oliver on her hip. "We have a baby, we have a pool, it's called an attractive nuisance. If that boy Leo, I think his mother called him, climbs the fence and hurts himself, we are liable. This sign makes our position legally clear." "You'd prosecute a 10-year-old. "I'd protect our family, Mark. They need to learn boundaries." A week later, Clara met the mother, Sarah. Sarah was at the community mailbox, struggling with a broken key. She looked exhausted. "You're Clara Redding," Sarah said, offering a tired smile. "I'm Sarah Miller. My son is Leo." "I know," Clara said. Sarah's smile faltered. "Oh, look, I'm sorry about the ball. He told me he's a good kid, just a lot of energy. We're new to this, the divorce. It's just us. He won't bother you again." "Good." Clara retrieved her mail. a Williams-Sonoma catalog, and an invitation. "It's just your pool," Sarah said, gesturing vaguely. "It's beautiful, he's just drawn to water. I told him he's not to look, not to go near the fence, that sign. It really scared him." "That was the intention," Clara said, her tone leaving no room for discussion. "My property is not a playground. The liability is astronomical. I'm sure you understand." Sarah's face hardened. The brief offer of neighborly peace vanished. "Oh, I understand. You've got your perfect house and your perfect life, and you don't want a renter's kid messing up the view. I get it." Loud and clear. Clara watched her walk away, annoyed. Why did people have to be so emotional? It wasn't personal, it was practical. The day of the incident was a flawless Saturday. Clara was hosting a small luncheon for Mark's partners, 4 couples, all dressed in tasteful linen. The nanny, Maria, was supposed to be watching Oliver inside. "The ambience is just perfect, Clara," one of the partners' wives cooed. "It feels like a resort." "Thank you, Cynthia. That's the goal," Clara smiled, circulating with a tray of champagne flutes. She was on the patio, Mark was at the grill. Maria appeared at the sliding glass door, her face pale. "Mrs. Redding, Oliver. He won't stop crying. I think it's his teeth. He won't take the bottle." Clara sighed. The timing was terrible. "Fine, give him to me. Go get the chamomile drops from the nursery." Maria handed over the fussy, red-faced baby. Clara, balancing him on her hip, tried to soothe him. SHH, Mommy's here. Look at the water. See the pretty water." Oliver's cries softened slightly, his eyes tracking the shimmer. Clara's phone, sitting on the bar, buzzed. It was the caterer for a bigger party she was planning, a much bigger party. "1 second, Oliver," she whispered. She needed her hands just for a second. The blue baby float, shaped like a little turtle, was right there, tethered to the patio steps. It was shallow. He was perfectly safe. He loved his float. She slipped him into it, his cries quieting to a whimper. He bobbed gently. "See, happy boy." She snatched up the phone. "Hello, yes, I specifically said the ahi, not the salmon. No, that's unacceptable." She turned, walking toward the house, her back to the pool. She was packing, gesturing with her free hand, her voice sharp. "If you can't guarantee the ahi, then we have a problem." She was 20 feet away. She was gone for perhaps 90 seconds. On the other side of the fence, Leo Miller was doing his chores, taking out the recycling. He hated chores. He hated this new house. He hated that his mom was always sad, and he hated that rich, mean lady who stole his ball. He passed the knothole in the fence. He always stopped to look. It was his secret defiance. He peered through, wanting to see the mean lady and her fancy friends. He saw the pool. He saw the baby and the turtle float. He saw the woman, Clara, near the house, yelling into her phone. He watched the baby. The baby leaned, reached for a yellow plastic ball that had fallen into the water. The baby leaned too far. The float weighted unevenly, listed. The baby, top-heavy, flipped. It was silent, just a glug, and the float was upside down. The baby was under it, strapped in. Leo's heart stopped. "Hey," he yelled. "Hey, lady." She didn't hear him. She was arguing about fish. He saw the baby's legs kick, once, twice, then they went still. Leo didn't think. There was no time. The gate was locked. He looked at the fence, 6 feet, cedar. He grabbed the top rail, his sneakers finding a foothold on a cross brace. He wasn't a trespasser. He wasn't a minor. He was a blur of motion. He hauled himself over, tearing his t-shirt on a splinter, and dropped onto the pristine turf. He sprinted the 10 feet to the pool's edge. He dove in, the cold water shocking his system. He grabbed the float, flipped it. The baby was blue. His eyes were closed. He was strapped in. Leo's fingers fumbled with the wet plastic buckle. It won't open. He ripped the strap, the cheap plastic tearing. He grabbed the baby, this tiny, heavy, limp thing, and hooked an arm under him, kicking desperately for the steps. He laid Oliver on the hot travertine. The baby wasn't breathing. "Help," Leo screamed, his voice cracking. "Help." He put his hands on the baby's chest, just like he'd seen in a movie. 1, 2, 3, come on, come on." Clara turned from her phone, her face a mask of annoyance. "Mark, I simply cannot. What is that noise?" She saw him, the renter's boy, dripping water on her patio. He was on his knees. He was touching. Then she saw the small, blue-white form on the ground beside him. The champagne flute shattered on the stone. Clara's scream was a raw, jagged tear in the perfect Saturday afternoon. The world dissolved into noise and chlorine. Mark was the first to move. He vaulted the grill, sprinting to the pool's edge in 3 long strides. Oliver. Clara's guests were frozen, a tableau of horrified faces and half-raised glasses. He flipped, Leo stammered, his small hands still on Oliver's chest, pushing rhythmically. He was under, I saw him. Out of the way, kid. Mark shoved Leo aside, not unkindly, just desperately. He tilted Oliver's head back, covered the baby's tiny mouth with his own, and breathed. 1, 2, he pressed on his chest. Clara was rooted to the spot 10 feet away. Her mind was a static-filled void. That boy, he's in the pool, he's wet. The sign, he's trespassing. Oliver is sleeping. Why is Oliver sleeping on the patio? The screen door of the duplex slammed. Leo, where are you? Sarah Miller, seeing her son's head over the fence, had run to the knothole. She saw the scene, the man doing CPR, her son soaked and shaking, the small blue form. Oh my God! She didn't hesitate. She ran to the side of the fence, grabbed the top, and boosted herself over with a frantic, athletic grace, landing hard on Clara's imported fescue. I'm a nurse, she yelled, running to Mark. Let me, my hands are smaller, you call 911 now. One of the guests, Cynthia, finally broke free, her fingers fumbling with her iPhone. Yes, 911, a baby, drowning. Sarah took over, her voice a sharp, professional monotone that cut through the hysteria. Mark, right? Mark, hold his head, tilt it. Good, Leo, baby, get back, get back. Leo scrambled backward, crab-walking until his back hit a lounge chair. He was shivering, his teeth chattering, his eyes locked on Oliver. Sarah placed 2 fingers on the baby's sternum. 1 and 2 and 3. She pinched his nose, sealed her mouth over his, and puffed. Breathe. Clara finally moved. A strangled animal sound ripped from her throat. My baby, my baby. She stumbled forward and grabbed Sarah's shoulder. What did you do? Get off him. What did you do? Sarah whipped her head around, her eyes blazing with a fury Clara had never seen. Get off me. Your son is dying. The words hit Clara like a physical blow. She recoiled, collapsing onto the wet turf, her linen dress soaking up the chlorinated water. Dying, my son is dying. Come on, little guy, Sarah muttered, her entire focus narrowed to the tiny, still chest. 1 and 2 and 3. Breathe. Oliver's body gave a sudden, spastic heave. A torrent of water and curdled milk gushed from his mouth. It was followed by the most beautiful sound in the world, a thin, ragged, coughing wail. He's back, Sarah gasped, tears streaming down her face as she scooped him up, turning him on his side. He's back, you're okay, Oliver, you're okay. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Mark had sunk to his knees, his head in his hands, making a sound that was half sob, half laugh. Clara just stared. Oliver was crying. Crying was good. Crying was loud, messy, alive. She looked at Sarah, this woman in a torn tank top, covered in pool water and her son's vomit, cradling Oliver, whispering to him. She looked at Leo, who was now wrapped in the arms of one of the party guests, a woman he didn't even know, shaking so hard his bones seemed to rattle. Then the paramedics were there, storming the backyard, their efficiency a brutal contrast to the party's lazy opulence. Who saw it? How long was he under? Who did CPR? Clara couldn't speak. Her throat was locked. Leo, his voice a small, trembling reed, spoke up. I did. I saw him flip. I was on the other side. I climbed over. A paramedic, a tall man with a grim face, looked at the boy. How long? A minute, maybe 2. I got him out. He was blue. The paramedic's eyes flicked to Clara, who was now being helped to her feet by her husband. He saw her stunned, dry-eyed expression. He saw the overturned baby float. He saw the brushed aluminum sign on the fence. No minors permitted. His gaze lingered on the sign, then back on Leo. The judgment was silent, but it radiated through the entire backyard. Okay, son, you did good, he said to Leo. You did real good. They stabilized Oliver, strapping a tiny oxygen mask to his face, wrapping him in a silver thermal blanket. We're taking him to County General PICU, the lead paramedic announced. 1 parent can ride with. I'm going, Clara said, her voice finally returning, hoarse and demanding. I'll go, Mark said, his voice flat, cutting her off. He didn't look at her, he just looked at his son. I'll go, you, stay here, talk to the police. The police, Clara's head snapped up. A uniformed officer was now standing at the gate, which a guest had unlatched. Ma'am, I need to get a statement about the accident. The accident, Clara repeated, dazed. Mark was already gone, following the gurney out of her perfect yard. The guests were gathering their things, avoiding her eyes, whispering, "Tragic! Negligence! Did you see?" The yard, her sanctuary, was a war zone. Wet towels, medical wrappers, a single tiny, saturated sneaker that had fallen off Oliver's foot, and the float bobbing near the skimmer, a mocking, bright blue turtle. Clara was left alone with the police officer, her party guests melting away. And with Sarah Miller. Sarah had used one of Clara's $200 towels to dry Leo off. She was standing by the fence, her arm around her son's shoulders, ready to boost him back over. "Wait," Clara said. The word was sandpaper. Sarah turned. Her face was empty of all emotion. Your son," Clara struggled, the words foreign in her mouth. Thank you, he saved." "Don't," Sarah cut her off, her voice low and dangerous. "Don't you dare thank me. You threatened him, you called him a nuisance. You told me my child wasn't welcome." It was a liability. The sign," Clara babbled, gesturing to the plaque. "A liability," Sarah repeated, her voice incredulous. "You were worried about him getting hurt while your own baby. My son is going to have nightmares about this for the rest of his life. He thought Oliver was dead. He thought he was holding a dead baby." "No, you don't get to speak." Sarah's voice was shaking with rage. "You stood there screaming at me while I was trying to save him. You were useless, your perfect, sterile world. It's a joke. You're a joke, Clara." Leo was crying silently, his face buried in his mother's side. The police officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he said to Clara, his notepad out, "we need to talk about the circumstances of this incident. I have a report of potential endangerment." Clara stared at him. Endangerment? It was an accident. The officer looked at the pool. He looked at the baby float. He looked at the sign on the fence, glinting in the afternoon sun. "That's what we're here to determine, ma'am," he said, his voice devoid of sympathy. "Your sign says no minors. But from what I understand, the only minor who wasn't supposed to be here is the one who saved your son's life. The other one was the victim." He clicked his pen. "Now, let's start from the beginning. Why did you leave the baby in the pool unattended?" Part 3. The PICU waiting room at County General was a unique kind of hell. It smelled of industrial cleaner, stale coffee, and a faint, sickly sweet undertone Clara couldn't identify. The beige walls were covered in cheerful, idiotic murals of smiling animals that only highlighted the misery of the parents slumped in the vinyl chairs. Clara sat apart from everyone, her linen dress still damp and smelling of chlorine. She had been here for 3 hours. Mark was somewhere inside, with the doctors. He had refused to let her come back with him. She had driven herself, her hands shaking so violently she'd barely kept the white knuckles of her Range Rover on the road. Her mind was replaying the scene, not the rescue, not the water, but the phone call, the caterer, the ahi tuna. She had been arguing over fish while her son was drowning. The thought was so grotesque, so horrifying, she couldn't fully process it. It was like a foreign object in her brain. It was the float, she told herself, testing the excuse. It was defective. It shouldn't have flipped. I'll sue the manufacturer. It's their fault. It was Maria, she tried next. She shouldn't have brought him to me. She's paid to handle it. She's the nanny. It's her job. But the excuses crumbled into dust. She had taken him. She had put him in the water. She had turned her back. Mark emerged from the double doors and her heart leaped. His face was gray, his eyes bloodshot. "Mark, is he?" "He's alive," Mark said, his voice a low rasp. He didn't walk toward her. He walked to the coffee machine. "He's breathing on his own there, monitoring him." "Monitoring him for what?" Clara stood, walking toward him, her arms wrapping around herself. Mark poured black, sludgy coffee into a styrofoam cup. "For what?" He laughed, a short, barking sound. "For brain damage, Clara, for the effects of hypoxia, for the seizures that might start tonight or tomorrow or never. They're watching him to see if the son we have is the same son we had this morning." "No," she whispered. "He was only under for a minute, the boy." "The boy," Mark said, spinning to face her. "His name is Leo. You know his name, Clara, or is he just the boy?" "Mark, this isn't the time." "This is exactly the time. I was at the grill. I was 10 feet away. And you were on the phone with your party planner. I heard you. Unacceptable. That's what you said. You were packing by the house. You walked away from him." "I was distracted, Maria." "Don't you dare," he snarled, his voice low and vicious. A nurse at the desk looked up, her expression hardening. Don't you dare blame Maria, don't you dare blame the float. You did this, your obsession with this. This image, this perfect, sterile life. No kids allowed, no mess, no noise. You got what you wanted, Clara, a perfectly quiet baby, at the bottom of a perfectly clean pool. Stop it, she hissed, tears of shame and rage finally welling. You're hurting me. Am I? He said. Good. He turned his back on her and sat in a chair, as far from her as he could get, and put his head in his hands. The silence between them was heavier, more suffocating than the grief of the other parents in the room. An hour later, the elevator doors pinged. Clara looked up, her stomach twisting. It was Sarah Miller and Leo. They looked profoundly out of place. Sarah was in the same torn tank top and shorts, her hair still stiff with chlorine. Leo had changed into a clean superhero t-shirt, but his eyes were huge and haunted in his pale face. He was clutching a piece of paper, a child's drawing, crumpled in his fist. They stood awkwardly at the entrance of the waiting room, scanned the faces, and saw Clara. Clara flinched. She looked at Mark, but he was staring at the floor, lost in his own private hell. She was on her own. Sarah walked toward her, her expression unreadable. Leo hid slightly behind her leg. We just, Sarah began, her voice hoarse. We wanted to see if is he okay? Clara was trapped. This woman, this renter, this nurse who had saved her child was the physical embodiment of her failure. To thank her felt like an admission of guilt. To ignore her was impossible. They're running tests, Clara said, her voice stiff. He's stable. Leo peeked out. He looked at Clara, then at the floor. He held out the crumpled drawing. This is for Oliver, he whispered. Clara looked at it. It was a crayon drawing of a superhero, the one from his shirt, flying over a house. Before Clara could react, Mark was out of his chair. He had seen them. He crossed the room in 2 strides, ignoring Clara, and knelt in front of Leo. He put his big hands on the boy's small shoulders. His voice, when he spoke, was thick with emotion. Leo, what you did, I don't have the words. He pulled the boy into a hug, a desperate, fatherly embrace. You saved him. You saved our son. Thank you. Leo, who had been tense and trembling, suddenly went limp, his arms wrapping around Mark's neck, and he began to sob. Not the silent, shaking tears from before, but deep, gut-wrenching wails. I thought he was dead, he cried into Mark's shoulder. He was so blue, and he was so heavy. You got him, though, Mark whispered, his own tears falling. You got him. You're a hero, son, a real-life hero. Sarah stood watching, her hand over her mouth, her own tears tracking through the grime on her face. Clara watched, frozen. Her husband was hugging another woman's son, calling him a hero, while she stood alone, the villain. The double doors opened, and a doctor in blue scrubs walked out. Redding family. Mark, Clara, and Sarah all turned. Mark stood, lifting Leo with him, unwilling to let the boy go. I'm Dr. Aris, the woman said. Oliver is a very, very lucky boy. Clara's knees went weak. His vitals are strong, the doctor continued. We're treating him for aspiration pneumonitis. He's got some water and junk in his lungs, which is to be expected. But his oxygen saturation is back to 100%. The neurological exam is clear. Clear, Mark whispered. You mean no damage? It appears not. The quick response? Dr. Aris looked at the group, confused, her eyes landing on Leo. The very quick response. It made all the difference. Hypoxia can cause permanent brain injury in as little as 3 minutes. Whoever got him out and started CPR. Well, you saved more than his life. You saved his future. Another 30 seconds. And we'd be having a very different and tragic conversation. The relief was so sudden, so total, it was like a physical decompression. Clara sagged against the wall, her hand over her heart. Oh, thank God. Mark was openly crying, still clutching Leo. Sarah looked at the doctor. He'll be okay, really okay. He'll be in the PICU for at least 48 hours for observation, but yes, I expect a full recovery, Dr. Aris smiled. You can see him one at a time in about 10 minutes. The doctor left, the tension broke. Clara, processing the miracle, turned to the Millers. Her old self, the one who managed transactions, was re-emerging. The guilt was still there, but now it was manageable. It was something to be handled. Sarah, Leo. Her voice was still shaky, but more composed. We are obviously, eternally in your debt. We will, of course, compensate you for the trouble. And Leo, what you did, you really shouldn't have climbed the fence. It was dangerous. But, thank you, we'll set up a fund for his college, whatever you need. She was trying to fix it, to put a price on it, to make it a transaction she could close. Sarah's face, which had been soft with relief, snapped back into a hard, cold mask. She looked at Clara with a slow, rising tide of pity and disgust. "Compensate us?" she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "You're offering us money? My son jumped a fence he was terrified of because you terrified him to save your baby, and you're offering to compensate us for the trouble." "That's not what I meant." "That is exactly what you meant," Sarah said, stepping forward. "You think this is a business deal? You think you can write a check and make this all go away? The police, the guilt, all of it. My son is going to need therapy. He just told your husband he has nightmares. He's a 10-year-old child who performed CPR on a baby he thought he'd let die. You don't get to compensate him for that. Keep your money, Clara. Just keep it." Mark, who had been settling a still-sniffling Leo into a chair, overheard the exchange. He stood up, his face dark. He walked over, not to Sarah, but to Clara. He stood directly between his wife and the Millers. He looked at Clara. His voice was dead, utterly devoid of anger or passion or anything at all. "She's right," he said. I think you should go home, Clara. I'll stay here." Clara reeled as if he'd struck her. "What, Mark? He's my son. The doctor said he's okay. I want to see my son." "Is he?" Mark said, his eyes empty. "Or is he just another part of your perfect display, the one you let sink to the bottom of the pool? Go home, Clara. Clean up the patio. Your friends made a mess." The house was silent. It was a thick, accusing silence that was worse than the screaming had been. The paramedics had left the gate open. The party guests had, as Mark suggested, left a mess. Half-eaten canapes, abandoned flutes of champagne, and the damp, $200 towel Sarah Miller had used on her son all lay scattered on the patio. Clara walked through the sliding glass door, her shoes clicking on the hardwood. The house was cold. She felt like a ghost. "Go home, Clara," his words echoed, a flat, final judgment. On the marble kitchen island, gleaming under the recessed lighting, was a business card. She picked it up. Jacqueline Wells, MSW, Child Protective Services. A case number was handwritten on the back in neat blue ink. The blood drained from Clara's face, leaving a cold, prickling numbness. The police officer? He had been serious, potential endangerment. They had been here in her home while she was at the hospital. They had opened a file. A new, sharper fear replaced the guilt. This wasn't about her marriage anymore. This was about Oliver. They could take him. She spent the next hour in a frantic, robotic haze. She didn't clean the patio. She called her lawyer. She left a hysterical, rambling voicemail. They're saying it's endangerment. It was an accident. Mark, he's not. You need to fix this. Fix it now." She sat on her silk sofa, staring at the empty, perfect room, and waited. The next morning, Mark came home. He looked like he hadn't slept in a year. He was carrying a diaper bag and a car seat. Clara ran to him. "Mark, where is he?" "He's in the car," Mark said, dropping the bag. "He's fine. They discharged him." "Oh, thank God." She started for the door. Mark put a hand on her chest, stopping her. "He's not coming in, Clara. We're not staying here." What are you talking about? This is our home." "No," Mark said, his voice flat. "This is your house. It's a museum. It's a display case, and I'm not raising my son in it. I'm taking him to my brother's place until I figure things out." "Figure things out? Mark, you're scaring me. We have a CPS case. We need to be a united front. We need to." "A united front?" he scoffed. "You mean we need to lie? We need to pretend you're a capable mother? I'm not going to lie for you, Clara. Not about this." "But I am his mother," she cried, the desperation rising. "Then you should have been one yesterday," he said. He picked up the diaper bag and walked back out the door. "My lawyer will be in touch with yours." Clara ran after him out onto the driveway. "Mark, no, you can't take my son." He didn't even look at her. He got into his car, where Oliver was sleeping peacefully in the back, and drove away. Clara stood in her driveway, in her wrinkled linen dress from the day before, and watched him go. The social fallout was immediate and brutal. The very neighborhood she had worked so hard to impress, the one she'd guarded with rules and signs, turned on her. The estate's private WhatsApp group, which she usually dominated with posts about HOA violations and landscaping tips, was now on fire with her name. Heard from Cynthia she was there. Clara was on the phone. "Child endangerment, that poor baby. And thank God for that renter boy, the one she tried to ban. Always said she was cold. Now we know, negligent. The women she'd hosted, The partners' wives she'd tried to charm were the ones feeding the fire. Her perfect reputation was incinerated in a matter of hours. 2 days later, Jacqueline Wells from CPS returned. This time, she was with the police detective from the party. This was not a friendly visit. Mrs. Redding, Jacqueline Wells was a no-nonsense woman with a kind, sad face that somehow made things worse. We're here to conduct a formal assessment of the home environment, and Detective Miller here needs your official statement. They sat in her perfect living room. Clara had her lawyer on speakerphone. My client has already stated it was a tragic, unforeseeable accident, the lawyer said, his voice tinny. That's the part we're struggling with, Detective Miller said, pulling out a small notebook. It doesn't seem unforeseeable at all. In fact, you installed a sign, Mrs. Redding, explicitly acknowledging the danger the pool posed to children. That was for other children, for liability, Clara said, her voice shaking. So you were aware of the risk, Jacqueline Wells interjected, her pen scratching on a form. You were aware it was an attractive nuisance. You took steps to prevent liability from your neighbors, but not to protect your own son. That's not true. It was a defective float. I turned my back for a second. 90 seconds according to your caterer's call log, the detective said. And security footage from your neighbor's Ring camera shows you walking 20 feet from the pool with your back to it while on the phone. Clara felt the trap close. They had evidence, they had witnesses, they had the sign. Where is your son now, Mrs. Redding? Jacqueline asked. He's with my husband, at his brother's. So your husband has already removed the child from your care. No, that's not, we needed space. We'll need that address, ma'am. We'll be conducting a welfare check there as well. For now, our recommendation is that all contact between you and your son be supervised, pending the outcome of this investigation. Supervised, the word was a prison sentence. Meanwhile, a different story was playing out in the local news. A small community blog had the story, and it was spreading. Local hero, 10-year-old renter's son saves toddler from drowning. The article was a masterpiece of coded language, contrasting the working single mom and her brave, quick-thinking son with the wealthy, gated community homeowner whose child was left unattended. Leo Miller was a hero. Clara Redding was a pariah. Desperate, panicking, Clara did the only thing she knew how to do. She tried to buy her way out. She drove to the bank, withdrew $10,000 in cash, and put it in a bank envelope. This wasn't a transaction. It was a gift, a thank you, a plea. She drove to the duplex. It was evening. The lights were on. She could see Sarah and Leo inside, eating dinner at a small card table. She knocked. Sarah opened the door, her face immediately hostile. What do you want, Clara? Please, Clara whispered, her hands trembling as she held out the envelope. Please, this is, for Leo, for his bravery, a reward, a scholarship, whatever you want, please, just take it. Sarah stared at the thick white envelope. She looked at Clara's terrified, pleading eyes. She understood instantly. You're being investigated, Sarah said. It wasn't a question. That's what this is. This isn't a thank you. This is a bribe. No, it's not. I'm grateful. Grateful? Sarah's laugh was a bitter, ugly sound. You're trying to buy my son's silence. You think if you give us money, we'll... What? Tell the police what a good person you are. Tell them it wasn't your fault. Leo had come to the door, his face pale. He was staring at Clara, not with the awe of a child who'd been offered a fortune, but with a cold, adult comprehension. He wasn't looking at a neighbor. He was looking at a villain. Get out, Clara, Sarah said, her voice low. My son is a witness. He's already given his statement, and he told the truth. This money. It's disgusting. It's as dirty as your pool. Please, Clara begged, the tears coming now hot and fast. You don't understand what they're doing. They're taking my son. You gave him away, Sarah said, her hand on Leo's shoulder, when you turned your back. Now get off my porch. She shut the door in Clara's face. Clara retreated to her car, the envelope still in her hand, a useless, pathetic wad of paper. She was defeated. She had no husband, no son, no reputation, and no allies. As she sat in her driveway, the phone in her purse buzzed. It was Mark. She snatched it up, a wild, desperate hope flaring. Mark, I tried to, I'm sorry. His voice was cold, formal. All the emotion from the hospital was gone, replaced by a chilling, sterile finality. Clara, I'm calling to let you know I've retained sole custody counsel. My lawyer will be at the house tomorrow to serve you the papers. I'm filing for sole custody. You will not be seeing Oliver or me again. Goodbye. The line clicked. Sole custody. He wasn't just leaving her, he was erasing her. Clara dropped the phone. The envelope of money fell from her lap, spilling onto the floor mat. She looked at her perfect, empty, silent house. She had lost. She had lost everything. The drained pool was a tomb. It was a massive, kidney-shaped concrete hole, stained with tide marks of algae and old leaves. The bright blue turtle float lay at the bottom, cracked and faded by the sun. It had been 2 months. Clara's life was unrecognizable. The investigation had concluded not with a criminal trial, but with a plea bargain that felt like a life sentence. Her high-priced lawyer had argued postpartum distress and a momentary tragic lapse. The state, wanting to avoid a messy trial, had agreed. Reckless endangerment pled down to probation. The terms, 2 years of mandatory therapy and court-monitored parenting classes. The house was on the market, the price slashed. Mark had been ruthless. He had the money, the power, and the moral high ground. He got the apartment downtown. He got the nanny, Maria, who had testified against Clara, to come work for him. He got Oliver. Clara got supervised visits, twice a week. 1 hour at a time in a beige, windowless room at the CPS facility while a social worker took notes. Oliver, now 8 months old, barely recognized her. He cried when she held him and reached for the social worker. Each visit was a fresh, exquisite torture. She was late for her class. The Mothers and Children Rebuilding Trust class was held in a church basement. It was a humiliating circle of other failures, women who had lost their kids to drugs, to alcohol, to abusive partners, to poverty. And then there was Clara in her designer jeans, the last vestige of her old life, the outcast among the outcasts. They hated her. She was the rich bitch who had it all and threw it away for a phone call. She pushed open the metal door and slipped into the back of the room, her head down. "Today we're talking about triggers," the counselor said. Clara scanned the room, and her heart stopped. In a different circle, on the other side of a flimsy partition, was Sarah Miller. She wasn't in Clara's group. She was in a different one, a voluntary one, a parental trauma support group. She was sitting with a cup of coffee, her head bowed, listening to another mother speak. Clara couldn't breathe. She hadn't seen Sarah or Leo since the day Sarah had shut the door in her face. When the session broke for a 5-minute mindfulness pause, Clara stood up, her legs feeling like water. She walked across the linoleum. "Sarah?" Sarah looked up. Her eyes widened just for a second, then the familiar, weary hostility settled in. "Clara, you're in that group." "Yes," Clara said. It was a confession, court-ordered. "Figured." Sarah looked away, clearly wanting the interaction to be over. Clara stopped. What was she doing? Apologizing, justifying. How is Leo?" Sarah's gaze snapped back to her, cold and sharp. "You don't get to ask that. You don't get to say his name." I know, I saw you, and Clara's voice broke. The polished, controlled woman was gone. All that was left was this raw, hollowed-out shell. "I'm so sorry." Sarah stared at her. This was a different Clara. The linen dresses were gone. The arrogance was gone. She just looked broken. Sarah let out a long, slow breath. "He's in therapy," she said, her voice flat. "He has nightmares. He won't go near water, not a bathtub, not a sprinkler. He's afraid, Clara. He's terrified he's going to fail, that he won't be fast enough. You put that on him. That's your legacy." The words were a blade, and Clara didn't flinch. She deserved it. "I know," she whispered. "I see that now. All I saw before, it was just maintenance, property values, noise, mess I didn't see, people I didn't see him. I was so angry that he existed, that he was there, and he was the only one who saw my son." She was openly crying now, ugly, gulping sobs. She didn't care who saw. "I'm sorry," she said again, the words raw. "Not for my house, not for my husband. I'm sorry for what I did to him, to your son, and to mine." Sarah watched her for a long moment. The anger that had sustained her for 2 months finally, perceptibly, softened. It was replaced by a deep, profound weariness. "He asks about Oliver," Sarah said quietly. "He asks if he's really okay, if he's sure he'd hurt him when he was doing the compressions." "He's perfect," Clara said, a tearful smile touching her lips. "I see him. Sometimes he's perfect, no damage. He's walking, pulling himself up. He's perfect because of Leo." She swiped at her face. "The house. It closes on Friday. It's done. I'm moving into an apartment, but my lawyer, before the divorce was final, I I did something. There's a trust, an irrevocable educational trust in Leo's name. Sarah's eyes narrowed. Clara, I told you. It's not for you, Clara cut her off, her voice gaining a small sliver of its old strength. It's not a payment, it's not a bribe, it's for him, it's managed by a bank. You can't refuse it and I can't touch it. It's just done. It's the only right thing I could do, the money. It's the only part of my old life I could make. Means something. He saved a life. That should be rewarded. Sarah looked at this woman, a stranger, really? You lost everything, didn't you? Clara nodded, a fresh wave of tears falling. I did. I built a fortress to keep the world out, and I locked my baby in with the only person who could hurt him, me. The counselor called everyone back. The break was over. Clara, Sarah said just before she turned, I hope you get him back someday, your son. Me too, Clara whispered. She walked back to her circle. That Friday, Clara stood on the sidewalk, watching the new owner's moving truck pull up. The for sale sign now had a sold banner across it. A minivan pulled in, and two children, a boy and a girl, maybe 8 and 10, exploded from the side door, screaming with laughter. They were carrying bright, fluorescent pool noodles. Last one to the pool is a rotten egg, the boy yelled. Mom, look, the girl shouted, it's huge. They ran through the open front door, their parents smiling, following behind with a box. Clara watched them run toward the backyard, toward the empty concrete hole, toward the place where her life had ended. A moment later, she heard their disappointed cries. It's empty. She heard their father laugh. Don't worry, kids. The pool guy comes on Monday. It'll be full by next week. Clara stood on the sidewalk, a phantom ache in her chest. The ultimate irony. The pool she had guarded so fiercely, the one she'd kept sterile and silent and adult, would now finally be used as it was always intended. It would be filled with noise and mess and shouting and joy. Just not by her. She turned away from the house, for the last time, with nothing but a suitcase in her trunk and a long road ahead. Part 6. 2 years passed, not in a blur, but in a slow, granular crawl, each day a deliberate act of atonement. Clara's world was no longer greige and travertine. It was linoleum and drywall. She lived in a one-bedroom apartment above a dry cleaner, the smell of steam and chemicals a constant reminder of her new station. She worked not for a high-powered firm, but as an administrative assistant at the very nonprofit that ran the parenting classes she had been forced to attend. She filed, she answered phones, and she listened to the stories of women who had fallen just as she had, but from a much greater height. Her probation was over. Her file with CPS was officially, miraculously closed. The supervised visits had ended a year ago, replaced by a step-down program. She met Oliver, now a chattering, stumbling toddler of 2.5, in a brightly lit room at a family center filled with primary-colored plastic toys. There was no social worker taking notes, just a counselor watching through a one-way mirror. Clara had learned to play. The woman who once worried about smudges on glass now sat on a sticky playmat, building lopsided towers of mega blocks just so Oliver could shriek with laughter as he knocked them down. She made airplane noises with a spoon full of applesauce. She got grape jelly on her shirt, and to her own profound shock, found that she did not care. Oliver knew her. He called her Mommy Clara, a distinction from the mommy he used for Maria, the nanny who was still his primary caregiver. It was a knife twist, but it was also a victory. He knew her. Today was the day, the family court hearing to petition for unsupervised visits. She sat in the hard, wooden bench of the courtroom, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. She wore a simple black dress, her hair pulled back. She looked neat, humble, and terrified. Mark was on the other side of the aisle, flanked by 2 lawyers. He looked successful, cold, and implacable. He was fighting this. Your Honor, her legal aid lawyer began, my client has completed every requirement of her probation. She has 104 hours of documented therapy. She has completed her parenting classes. She has held a steady job and maintained a safe home environment for over 18 months. Her counselors at the family center will testify that her interactions with her son are loving, appropriate, and attentive. She is asking for the next logical step, 4 hours of unsupervised time, 1 day a week. Clara's therapist, Dr. Hayes, took the stand. Clara Redding is not the same woman I met 2 years ago, she said, her voice firm. The woman I met was in a state of profound narcissistic denial. The woman before you today is present. She has done the painful work of dismantling her old self and accepting full, unmitigated responsibility for her actions. She is, in my professional opinion, not only fit but deeply prepared to be a mother to her son. Then Mark's lawyer called him to the stand. "Mr. Redding," his lawyer asked, "do you believe your ex-wife is a danger to your son?" Mark looked at Clara. His gaze was heavy, not with the fire of the hospital, but with a deep, weary sadness. "I believe she has changed. I believe she is trying," he said, his voice quiet. "But the woman I was married to, she was an expert at creating an image. She's doing it right now. The humble dress, the non-profit job, it's all a performance." "Objection," Clara's lawyer said. "Speculation." "Sustained. Mr. Redding, stick to the facts." "The fact is," Mark said, his voice gaining an edge, "she only has to fail once. She only has to look at her phone for 90 seconds. She only has to get distracted one time and my son is gone. The difference is this time Leo Miller won't be there to save him. I am not willing to take that risk. She made her choice. She chose the party. She chose the phone. She chose the fish. She did not choose our son." The words hung in the air, brutal and true. Clara bent her head, a silent tear rolling down her cheek. The judge, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, looked over her glasses. "Mrs. Redding," she said. Clara stood, her legs shaking. "Your ex-husband has made a powerful point," the judge said. "He speaks to the core of this matter, trust. You did not just fail your son, Mrs. Redding. You failed the fundamental biological contract of motherhood. Why should this court believe you will not fail again?" Clara looked up, her eyes meeting the judge's. She didn't look at Mark. "Because, Your Honor," she said, her voice trembling but clear, "I live with the ghost of what I did every second of every day. The woman Mr. Redding described. He's right about her. She was a performance. She was hollow, and she's gone." She took a deep breath. "He says I only have to fail once, but what he doesn't understand, what no one can understand, is that I am the only person in this world who will never fail him that way again, because I know what it costs. He's afraid I'll look at my phone for 90 seconds. I haven't let my phone out of my sight in 2 years, not because I'm addicted, but because I am terrified of it. I have nightmares where I hear it ringing and I wake up screaming." She looked at Mark, her gaze a raw plea. "I am not asking for forgiveness, Mark. I am not asking you to trust me. I am asking the court to trust the terror that I live with. It's my penance, and it's what will keep Oliver safe. I am hypervigilant in a way no other person, not even you, not even Maria, can be. Because I'm the one who let him go. And I'm the one who will spend the rest of my life making sure he is never, ever let go again." The courtroom was silent. The judge stared at Clara for a long, heavy moment. "I have read the reports," the judge said finally. "I have heard the testimony. This court is not in the business of punishment. It is in the business of child welfare." She shuffled her papers. "Petition for unsupervised visitation is granted. 4 hours every Saturday. You will pick him up at 10 a.m. and return him at 2 p.m. You will not, under any circumstances, take the child near a body of open water. No pools, no ponds, no lakes. A bathtub must be supervised with 100% physical contact. Is that clear?" Clara collapsed back into the bench, a sob of pure, agonizing relief choking her. "Yes, Your Honor, thank you, yes." Mark sat frozen, his face pale. He had lost. Her first Saturday. It was 10 a.m. She stood outside Mark's downtown high-rise, her hands shaking. The doorman buzzed her in. Mark met her at the door, holding Oliver, who was dressed in a little red jacket. "Hi, Ollie, Clara whispered, her arms out. "Mommy Clara," he squealed and launched himself at her. She buried her face in his hair, breathing in the scent of him. For the first time in 2 years, she was holding her son, and no one was watching. "His bag," Mark said, his voice wooden. He handed her a small backpack. "Diapers, wipes, his snack. He likes the apple ones, the green ones." "I know," she said softly. "I bought some." "Right." The silence was an awkward, gaping wound. We're going to the city park," she said. "The one with the dry playground, the sandpit." "Fine," Mark said. 2 p.m., Clara, not 2:01. "I know, thank you, Mark." He just nodded and shut the door. She took Oliver to the park. It was a perfect sunny day, and it was the most terrifying 4 hours of her life. She didn't just watch him, she orbited him. Her head was on a constant swivel. Every other person, every dog, every car was a threat. He stumbled near the swings. Her heart leaped into her throat. He cried when another child took his toy. She was there mediating. He ran, laughing, toward the sandbox, and she ran with him, her hand hovering, never more than 6 inches from his body. She was exhausted, she was drained, and she was, for the first time since his birth, truly a mother. She returned him at 1:58 p.m. Mark opened the door. Oliver was asleep on her shoulder. He's asleep, she whispered, her eyes shining with the simple, profound joy of it. We had a good time. Mark looked at her. He saw the genuine, bone-deep exhaustion in her face. He saw the grass stains on her knees from the sandbox. He saw the faint smear of applesauce on her cheek. This was not a performance. He stepped back, holding the door open. "Come in," he said, his voice quiet. You can put him in his crib." It was the first time she had been invited into his home. It was the first tiny seedling of a thaw. 4 more years. The seedlings of trust, tended with excruciating care, had grown into a fragile, functional piece. Clara now had 50-50 custody. Her life was unrecognizable from the one she had craved. Her small, 2-bedroom apartment was not a feature in Design Digest. It was a home. The walls were covered in Oliver's finger paintings. The sofa, a second-hand find, was covered in juice stains. Her old, pristine life was a distant, shameful memory. She worked as a paralegal at a family law firm, a job she'd gotten after her legal aid lawyer saw her meticulous, obsessive nature and offered her a chance. Oliver, at 6, was a bright, loud, messy boy who was the center of her universe. Her relationship with Mark was a carefully negotiated truce. They were co-parents. They met at handoffs, discussed school and dentists, and shared a quiet, profound love for their son. The romance was dead, buried at the bottom of that concrete pool. But a new, scarred-over respect had formed. He had seen her week after week, year after year, never be late, never make an excuse, never be anything less than 100% present. He had, against all his expectations, learned to trust her again. Leo Miller was 15. Clara hadn't seen him since that day in the church basement, though she thought of him often. The irrevocable trust, which her lawyer had quietly confirmed was accepted, had grown. It was enough to send him to any university in the country. It was the one piece of her old fortune that she was proud of. She had heard through the grapevine of the nonprofit world, where Sarah Miller was now a well-regarded nurse manager, that Leo was a good kid. Quiet, intense, brilliant at science. And he was on the high school swim team. The irony was so sharp it had taken Clara's breath away. Sarah had mentioned it just once at a shared volunteer event. His therapist thought it would be good for him, Sarah had said, their old animosity long since faded into a shared history. Exposure therapy, too? Take back the power. He's good, but he's still scared. He hates open water. He only does the 50-meter indoor. The town's annual Lake Fest was a community staple. It was a hot July Saturday. Clara and Oliver were there to meet Mark. Oliver was going to his dad's for the weekend. The main event was a youth triathlon, and the shore of the lake was crowded. "Mommy, can I get a snow cone?" Oliver begged, pulling on her hand. "After we find Daddy," she said, scanning the crowd. She heard the starting pistol fire. The youth swim portion had begun. A few dozen teenagers, all arms and legs, thrashed their way from the dock to a buoy 200 yards out and back. Clara glanced at the water, an old, cold spike of adrenaline hitting her. It was automatic. She hated open water, hated it. She saw Sarah Miller standing near the finish line, her hands twisted in a knot. And she saw Leo. He was in the water, his strokes powerful but strained. He was near the front of the pack. "There's Daddy," Oliver shouted and ran toward Mark, who was waving from near the snow cone truck. Clara smiled and started to follow, her attention divided. Then a scream. It wasn't a having fun scream. It was sharp, panicked. "Help, cramp, I can't." About 40 yards out, one of the swimmers, a smaller boy, had stopped. He was treading water frantically, his face contorted. He went under, came back up, sputtering. The lifeguards, stationed on the dock and at the buoy, were too far. They blew their whistles, but they were seconds away. Leo, just 10 feet from the struggling boy, stopped. He turned. Clara watched, frozen. She saw the moment the past collided with the present. Leo's face, visible from the shore, was a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. He looked at the boy. He looked at the shore. He was paralyzed. The nightmare Sarah had described, the fear of failing, was happening. He didn't move. He just trod water, his breathing ragged, as the other boy went under again. Something in Clara snapped. She didn't think, she didn't plan, she reacted. "Mark, watch Oliver," she screamed. She kicked off her sandals and sprinted, fully clothed, down the small beach. She hit the water in a shallow, messy dive, her white summer dress instantly heavy. Help is coming, she shouted, her voice cutting across the water. She was not a strong swimmer, but she was propelled by a force she hadn't known she possessed. It was the terror, the hypervigilance, the penance. It had been her prison for 6 years, and it had just become her weapon. She swam with a desperate, ugly, powerful stroke, all adrenaline and rage. Rage at the water, at the past, at her own failure. She reached the boy just as his head was slipping under for a third time. She grabbed a handful of his swimsuit and his hair and hauled him to the surface. He was choking, gagging. "I've got you," she gasped, hooking her arm under his chin, just as she'd seen in the CPR videos she was now forced to watch quarterly. "You're okay. I've got you." The lifeguard's paddleboard slammed into them a moment later. "We've got him, ma'am." They hauled the sputtering boy onto the board. Clara, her energy gone, just clung to the side, her chest heaving. The crowd on the shore was applauding. Clara let the lifeguard tow her in. When she could stand, she stumbled out of the water, her dress clinging, her hair plastered to her face. Mark was there, Oliver on his hip. His face was ashen. Sarah Miller ran to her. "Clara, oh my God." Clara just nodded, catching her breath. She looked past them. Leo was standing by the finish line, wrapped in a towel, shaking violently. He was staring at her, his face a complex mask of shame, relief, and awe. He had been beaten by his own ghosts. Clara walked past Sarah, past Mark, past her son. She walked right up to the trembling 15-year-old boy. He wouldn't meet her eyes. I froze," he whispered, his voice cracking. I saw him, and it was the baby. Clara put her wet hands on his shoulders. She looked him directly in the eye. "Leo," she said, her voice quiet but fierce. "You already saved a life. You did your part. You don't have to do it again." He looked up, tears welling. "But You got him out of the pool," she said, her voice thick. "You gave him back to me. You did your part. It's okay. It's okay to be scared." He lunged forward and hugged her, burying his face in her wet shoulder, just as he had hugged her husband in the hospital waiting room 6 years before. "I'm sorry," he sobbed. "I'm not," she whispered, holding him. "You're okay. You're safe." Sarah was standing beside them, her own tears falling. She put her hand on Clara's back. "Thank you," Sarah whispered, "not for the college fund, not for the apology, for this, for saving her son again in a way no one else could." Clara finally let go and turned. Mark was standing there, holding Oliver. He was looking at her, really looking at her, for the first time in 6 years. The last wall of ice, the final protected barrier around his heart, had just melted. He saw not the ghost of the woman he despised, but the hero she had become. "You were fast," he said, his voice hoarse. Clara gave a small, weary, waterlogged smile. She walked over and kissed the top of Oliver's head. "I try to be," she said. She looked out at the lake, the sun glinting off the surface. The water was no longer a tomb. It was just water. The sign on her old fence was a distant echo. Her life was loud and messy and full of children, hers and other people's, and she was, finally, watching.